Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Liza and I'm a holistic health coach. And today we are wrapping up our series going over the 10 pillars of wellness. And so today's pillar is environment. And so I'm going to hopefully be giving a brief overview of many different things that make up our environment and just go over the different health implications that they can have on our lives. So let's get into it. I do want to make a quick note before I dive into this video that the purpose of all this information is simply to inform you. I'm not trying to cause fear in you or be kind of doom and gloom, because I know it can be a lot to hear that the air you're breathing, water you're drinking, clothes you're wearing are all toxic. But truly my aim is to just educate you so that you can just make more informed choices regarding these different areas of our lives. And so I just want you to walk away not thinking that you need to overhaul your entire life in a night. Really, you just want to make changes where you can, understand that it's going to be a process, treat it with the mindset that your body is resilient. Maybe you didn't know better before, and that's okay, because trying to fit into this toxic mold of, well, everything needs to be 100% cotton or 100% non-toxic and I can never do this again, that's just as toxic as somebody who's on the opposite side of the spectrum who doesn't care about their health and is eating junk food all the time and just not taking care of themselves. So you just want to be careful that you're not slipping into those camps of thinking and that you're just operating from a standpoint of wanting to take care of your body, but knowing that we are not perfect and we don't live in a perfect world and there is grace. So with that, let's start in the kitchen. This is the place where many meals get made, and we just got to talk about what your food is touching on its journey from either your pantry or your fridge to finally your stomach. So the number one thing to think about is your pans. The biggest thing right now is non-stick pans, and how these work is because they are coated in a material known as Teflon, which its backstory is it was created in 1938 in a lab on accident. The scientists discovered that nothing was sticking to it, and so they're like, why not apply it to pans? And it took off, became just a huge staple in kitchen use. That convenience comes at a cost. The problem with Teflon is that it can have a lot of serious side effects on your health, especially when there are scratches on the pan surface, which just allows more of that material to come up and get integrated into your food. This material can wreak havoc on your thyroid, which subsequently can mess with your hormones, is associated with cancer, and can even cause liver damage. Instead, you want to opt for pans made out of stainless steel, which you can actually make non-stick, by the way, and then also you can use cast iron pans as well. Moving on to the types of utensils you use on your food. Plastic and heat do not do well together, and so if you're using plastic spatulas for cooking or even spoons to stir things that are super hot, that can just lead to literally a melting pot of microplastics in whatever food that you're making. So to mitigate this microplastic source, you want to use wood or even stainless steel utensils. Going off of that, you also want to stay away from plastic cutting boards, which is a huge source of microplastic shedding, because every time you're cutting down with a knife, whether that's on your meat, veggies, fruit, it's shedding microplastics that are then sitting and soaking into your food. It's also going up in the air, you're breathing that in. So really just not a good solution all around. Instead, you want to opt for getting wooden cutting boards if possible. Lastly, you want to think about what storage containers you have for your food. If it's plastic, you may want to purchase some glass, stainless steel, or even you could get silicone bags instead of plastic baggies to reduce your microplastic exposure. And please, for the love, do not microwave food in plastic containers. That exponentially increases the amount of microplastics that get released into the food. I'm talking millions upon millions of particles are now in your food and you're ingesting that. So if that is a huge staple of your diet, I would seriously consider lessening the amount of meals that you have that way. Prep some meals ahead of time and put them in glass containers and heat them up that way. Moving on to air. Air is obviously something that we absolutely need to live, and so it's really important to consider the quality of air that we're breathing. Of course, everyone knows about outdoor pollutants and smoke and things like that, but I really want to focus on indoor air because studies estimate that in modern societies, people spend upwards of 90% of their time indoors, and so that's a lot of time. So we need to talk about how clean that air can be. So inside air is notoriously dirty with things like particulate matter, like dust, and then also VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds that are being released into the air from things such as building materials, paint, cleaning products, off-gassing from mattresses, insecticides, stoves, and then also things like candles and other scented products, which scented things like candles or air fresheners are super bad because a single fragrance contains many chemicals that react with ozone in the air to create secondary pollutants such as formaldehyde and benzene that are very damaging to your health, and you don't want to be breathing that in on a daily basis. They can really wreck your respiratory system and even aggravate conditions like asthma, and can result in cardiovascular illness, cancer, dermatitis, and premature mortality. So definitely something that needs to be addressed. Which one of the best ways you can mitigate this toxin is by getting an air filter for at least your bedroom, but also even like your living room, different bedrooms if you can. If you only have one or two, cycle them into different rooms as well. But we like to have ours, which we have a Lasco model, running all day and night. You do have to change the filter. I think there's 2 different filters on there. I think it's maybe like once every 6 months. One of them is like maybe once a year. So that's just something to keep track of. I will definitely do a deep dive video on this later. But another more inexpensive way to filter your air is actually through plants. So we all learned about photosynthesis in school, but essentially, if you just need a refresher, through the process of photosynthesis, plants absorb the carbon dioxide that we exhale, and then they release oxygen into the air for us to breathe. But what's also super cool is that plants can absorb these pollutants that I mentioned a little bit ago from the air through their leaves and their roots, and actually break them down into not so harmful substances, which is super great. Plants like a snake plant can filter out formaldehyde and benzene, 2 of the secondary pollutants I just mentioned, which is amazing, but they are mildly toxic to cats and dogs. So just keep that in mind if you have fur babies. And then also a spider plant is great at filtering out formaldehyde in the air, and these are not toxic to pets. And then a free way to help just kind of refresh the air in your house is just to open a window. Obviously, if there's a wildfire going on outside, or you maybe live in the middle of the city, not the best to do all the time, but again, that's also why you can have an air filter to filter out that air. But I really do like opening the windows, not only to hear the birds or maybe smell freshly mown grass. It's really good to do, especially right away in the morning, even if it's just for 5 minutes. People like to call it burping their house, and you're just, like I said, refreshing the dirty inside the air that's been circulating, all night while you were sleeping. So it's good to just get a little break from that. Moving on to water. I talked about this at length in my hydration video, but since water is such a huge part of your environment, I did just want to touch on it briefly again. You can check out ewg.com, type in your city or state, and just check out the handful of contaminants that are in North Carolina. There's a ton of them, spoiler alert. So that's just in tap water. So it's really important that you have some way to filter your water. You can do a whole video on different filters as well. And something to think about too is getting a filter for your shower head, because you're literally exposing your entire body and skin, which is very absorbent, which I'll talk about later, to all of those contaminants, and you're breathing them in as well from the steam. So that is a really important one. And then also, if you're taking a ton of baths or your kids are taking baths, a bath filter would also be really great to think about as well. Next up, we have your bedroom. Since we spend approximately a third of our entire lives sleeping, I thought this would be a pretty important thing to talk about. So first, we need to talk about what you're sleeping on, starting off with your sheets. A lot of us maybe are sleeping on polyester or rayon sheets, and these are all just fancy terms for plastic. And as I've talked about with the kitchen section, plastic and your body are not best friends. So you want to opt for more natural fibers such as cotton, or linen is super great. And I know Target has some pretty affordable options for not only sheets, but comforters or quilts as well that are made out of good materials. And Quincy is actually another good brand as well online that actually this quilt on our bed is from, and I love it. And then also when you talk about what's underneath, what you're putting your sheets and comforter on, which is your mattress. And these can be toxic for 2 reasons. So one, they have flame retardants sprayed on them, obviously to reduce the risk of a fire, but these are just a chemical concoction. And then they also have off-gassing concerns as well, because a lot of mattresses are made out of memory foam, which is synthetic type of foam, and that's releasing a lot of VOCs, which I mentioned earlier, volatile organic compounds, into the air, and you're sleeping on it at night for 8+ hours maybe, and breathing that in. But something to look for is brands that have different certifications. So this could be through Green Guard Gold, Oikotex, Certipure US, or Eco Institute, that all have independent testing for emission standards. When I was researching this, Avocado came up as a really good brand that had a lot of these certifications and more, and it's made out of latex and wool, so you know that you're definitely gonna be sleeping on something non-toxic, but definitely just something to look into. And then also you want to think about lighting. I know that I touched on your circadian rhythm and all that stuff in my sleep video, but I definitely do want to do another video on it as well, because it's so foundational for really your entire health. All of your bodies run on internal clocks, they run on the sun. So something to think about to help come alongside that rhythm is getting incandescent lights and then trying to keep it dark or darker after sunset. So using things like candles or lamps and trying to turn off overhead lights to really just help signal to your body that, hey, it's time to wind down, sun went down, and not exposing yourself to so much blue light. Using blue light blocker glasses, if you have those as well, is going to be really important. This is a huge topic as well, but skincare is something you need to think about for sure, because our skin is our largest organ and it is very absorbent, which is great when it comes to things like getting vitamin D from the sun, but it is not so great news when it comes to the products that we, especially as women, slather on our bodies. Many of these products are loaded with endocrine disrupting chemicals that really do a number on your thyroid and your hormones, and they are most definitely a culprit in why we're seeing such a rise in endometriosis, PCOS, painful periods, and infertility for not only women but men as well. And the biggest culprit behind skincare is going to be fragrance, which is just this really umbrella term for a whole slew of chemicals that companies are just putting in their products because they're cheap, maybe they smell good, whatever it is. And like I said, these are not doing good things for your hormones or just your other bodily systems in general. And what makes this really sketchy is that these companies who are making these products are basically just self-regulating. So they don't have to disclose, what their fragrance blend is made up of. Even if it's a natural product that maybe says natural fragrance blend, that doesn't mean crap. You have no idea what that's made out of if they're not being transparent about it and saying this is specifically coming from, an ethically sourced essential oil or vanilla bean oil, something like that. You have just absolutely no idea what that company means when they say that. So you just have to be super careful about vetting that. Buy from smaller companies, buy from companies that are independently tested. And another thing too is that many of these chemicals that are in the products, as I mentioned in the air section of this video, are mixing with the ozone in the air to create these really toxic secondary pollutants like formaldehyde that you're then breathing in. But just imagine what it's doing beneath your skin. Like I said, your skin is very absorbent and it's basically a straight shot to your bloodstream. And these chemicals have easy access to your tissues and different organs, and then your liver gets super overwhelmed by the amount of toxins it's trying to process, and that can get sluggish and slow down and just messed up because it doesn't recognize these chemicals and there's just too much going on. And these chemicals can also mess with the organs that they're getting in contact with or the tissues. And at the very end of the scale could be causing things like dermatitis or different allergies. We see that a lot in people with laundry detergent or maybe like perfume or lotion allergies, but then it can also go up the scale in intensity to where we see women and men struggling with hypothyroidism, struggling with infertility issues, painful periods, maybe even cancer, respiratory or even heart problems too, because these chemicals just really have access to your entire body. And if you're slathering on 10 of them in a single morning routine, it's just really a lot for your body to handle. So that is definitely something I want to talk more in detail about, how you can slowly replace the products that you're using and just be more mindful of what you're consuming and putting on your body. Clothes is another huge topic too that is just full of microplastics. And remember how I said earlier in this video that plastics and heat do not mix? Well, that holds true for clothing, which I'll get into in a second. But first I just gotta ask, how many clothes these days are being advertised as being made from recycled polyester? And they're touting it like it's a super great thing. But putting plastic on your body is not something to be celebrated. And like I said, plastic and your body are not best friends. And there's actually a study done on dogs who wore underwear made out of plastic, so it's loaded with PFAS, which are forever chemicals, and by the end of the study, a lot of the dogs were actually found to be infertile. So if that's happening to dogs, just think about us as humans who are wearing super tight undergarments that are not letting our organs breathe, and like all the articles of clothing we're wearing are plastic. And then you got to really think about activewear too. Lululemon is actually getting sued right now over this because there are a ton of PFAS, especially in the crotch part of their leggings. What's even worse about plastic, like I said in the kitchen part of this video, is that when you heat up plastic, you accelerate the shedding process. And so you're getting warm when you're working out in your Lululemon leggings, right? And because you're getting warm, you're going to start sweating, which just allows your pores to open up because they are trying to release heat to cool you down, your internal temperature down. Now the plastic has an even easier access to get into your body, into your bloodstream and organs and stuff. But then also the friction of your movement allows for even more microplastics to be shed. So just really important if you're going to start somewhere with trying to get over to more organic material is think about what you're working out in, and also focus on undergarments too, like bras and underwear, because those are the closest to really sensitive organs like your reproductive organs, and so you just want to make sure you're taking care of your body, and especially when you're working out too. Many clothes today are sweat resistant or rain resistant, which is super convenient and really nice, but that convenience also comes at a cost because the dyes and the materials that these clothes have to be made with, or the chemical baths that they're put in to make them sweat resistant, are not very healthy. And a lot of these materials are actually known carcinogens and can also negatively impact your reproductive and immune health as well. So you just think of companies, like Shein, that are constantly under scrutiny for good reason, for not only labor laws, but also the amount of chemicals they're putting in their clothes. Like I think even just their shoes alone have just an exponential amount of lead that is just not even regulated at all, and girls are putting that on their body sometimes without even washing it in the machine first, and it's just touching your skin. It's just so horrible. It's not even just cheap brands like that, it's also more expensive, what you would think would be sustainable brands like the parent company Urban, who owns Free People, Anthropology, and Urban Outfitters. People think that they're spending more money to get higher quality clothes, but a lot of these clothes are just coming from really sketchy places that have a lot of chemicals, and that come from very unhealthy places where they're just loaded up with chemicals and then just sold at a premium price. And what's really sketchy is that Urban says that they have practices in place to, help with chemical usage or how they manage the water that they use, but they have not gone into detail on any of that stuff. So, it's like they're just a big corporation. Do you really trust them with that? So just something to think about too when it comes to your clothes. I save the best for last, I think, in my opinion. I know this can definitely be a controversial one, but we gotta talk about Wi-Fi, radiation, non-native EMFs. There are not a ton of studies out yet, but there are definitely more and more studies coming out showing the negative health impacts that being so exposed to this radiation and things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth can have on our bodies. Basically, why it's a problem is it's just a combo of radiation being so close to us. Think about people who wear AirPods for extended periods of time, Apple Watches, which are on their body all day, putting their laptops in their laps, taking a phone call right next to your head, using virtual reality on your face, and then putting your phone in your pocket. This radiation, while not as strong as X-rays, for example, but they are constantly surrounding us. Think of, too, the Wi-Fi throughout your house, Bluetooth signals, and especially if you live in an apartment complex, everyone else's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices as well. And then cell towers. This bombardment of radiation can really take a toll on your health and your body. Things like reproductive organs are especially sensitive to radiation like this. And then also cell death and oxidative stress are common issues stemming from radiation, and heat can be especially detrimental to sperm health. What's also interesting to note is that the standards for wireless device safety have not been updated since 1997. That's coming up on 30 years of not updated regulations, which is just wild to think about, because think of how much technology has transformed even just the past 5 years. So 30 years, there's a lot that should really be updated and changed and revisited. So it's also funny but not so funny to note is that these standards rely on a plastic head, so not even a real human head. This one study looked at how much RF exposure, so radio frequency absorption, occurs, and they found that 80% of emitted phone energy is absorbed by the head when you're taking a phone call right next to your ear, and then 50% of the device's energy is absorbed during virtual reality use. What's also really sobering is that children were absorbing 2 to 3 times higher amounts of RF than adults were, and this is due to just their thinner skull because they're still growing yet, and that's just really dangerous when you think about how much growing they have left to do and how bad radiation can be. So that was just a really crazy finding. So ways that you can lessen radiation: if you can, turn your Wi-Fi off at night. This will just help mitigate a lot of that radiation coming in. Turn your phone off and get it out of the room, or at least if you need it for your alarm, just keep it out of the room. That's fine. That's what my husband does. Or you can get an alarm clock, like a circadian alarm clock like I have too. That'll be way less startling for you and way less radiation as well. You also want to try to keep your phone as far away from your body as you can. This is known as the inverse square law, where radiation decreases the further away you distance yourself from the source. And so don't have your phone on your lap while you're scrolling, Or don't take phone calls right next to your head, put it on speakerphone. Don't put your laptop on your lap when you're working on stuff, put it up on a desk or a table. Also, if you have to put your phone in your pocket, please put it on airplane mode. This will also significantly reduce the amount of radiation coming out of it. Do not have Wi-Fi and cellular data on while that's in your pockets. There's so much radiation and connections it's trying to establish, and it's all just right next to really important areas of your body. So just some things to think about here. And on that note, that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it was a lot, but just really, again, want to share this information to be helpful. You can go do your own research. You can ask me questions. You can drop them in the comments below. If you're like, wow, I really need some help just trying to fix these areas of my life, I would love to talk to you and be that person for you. So you can click the link in the description box below to schedule a free discovery call with me where we can just chat about your different health goals, things that you would like help with, and we can go from there and work together for 1, 3, or 6 months, whatever you feel that you need. But yeah, stick around, because now that we're done with this series, I'm going to be trying to go into just shorter, more deep dive videos on some of the stuff that I talked about in this video. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.